This is like the most slippery slope question because it's my favorite topic and I could monologue.
Let's slip. Let's get into it.
What the is going on?
I like to party.
Jesus, honey, wax much?
This is Unwaxed
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
with Sophia and Sistine Stallone.
Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Unwaxed podcast. Honestly, when I say it like that, I sound so fake. Did you just hear the intro? I'll be honest, that was so
Hey
too
everybody,
much.
welcome back to the Unwaxed podcast, blah, blah, blah.
With your
show
favorite
some
sisters.
soul, show some heart, Sophia.
Welcome
Run it back.
to the Unwaxed podcast. Should I
All right.
cry when I do it instead? Okay, hi
Maybe
guys,
not.
welcome back. I know that was just way too much. With your favorite sisters, Sophia and...
Sistine, yeehaw, baby. We just got back from Stagecoach, and let me tell you, there is still dirt in my eyes.
Oh yeah, I remember going home, blowing my nose, and just black stuff came out.
Cute.
It was really nice, super hot. It was great, and now I don't even want to know what's filled in my lungs.
Yeah, no,
really
it was
bad.
a stacked weekend. My liver is quaking.
Yeah.
Not feeling great. I'm sort of feeling the come down. You know, we don't have COVID, but every time you go on a bender or a festival for a few days in a row, you just kind of feel the repercussions of it. I feel a little bit under the weather.
Totally. Well, it's because when you go to these events, you're there for literally like 10 hours
Yeah.
and you're nonstop walking. You're barely eating.
Yeah.
The easiest thing to grab is a drink.
And plus, when you're living in a house of people, you know, it would be wrong to not have a margarita at 11 a.m. with your breakfast.
I don't think I've ever drank so many frozen margs just throughout
Yeah.
the day for fun
Yeah.
in my life, but it was so great. I actually loved it. I don't remember the last time I just kind of enjoyed having alcohol. Whenever.
It's true, because you know how I always say that I just feel like I'm not as fun anymore when it comes to drinking. It's nice to sort of let that guard down and just enjoy.
No, I feel that. But I had a lot of fun. I would say, though, in comparison to other ones we've been to, they were probably the least amount I knew about for the last 2 days.
the lineup.
The lineup, yeah. I feel like the Friday, I knew everybody. I knew the headliners for all 3 days, but it wasn't all of my favorites.
That's what's an
You
interesting
know?
point. When you go to a concert or festival and you actually don't know any of the lyrics and you're just sort of standing there,
It's
not
not
as
that
fun.
fun.
It's not as fun.
It's not. Like, I would say, though, and we both agreed on this, our favorite was Carrie Underwood. Wow.
Can we talk about the legs on that woman?
Can we just talk about the entire body, face, voice of that woman? She was unbelievable. And I actually have never seen her live or even considered ever. I wouldn't say she's my favorite country artist. Now she is.
But she's a great performer. And
Wow.
I would literally put prosthetics into my calves to have them look like hers. How old is she? 39, 40?
Yeah, she has 2 kids,
Ridiculous.
everything. I know. Her body
Ridiculous.
looks insane. And her voice was so good. They brought out the guy from Guns N'
Axl
Roses.
Rose.
Yeah.
Axl
Wow.
Rose, let me tell you, he was up there and he was living his best life.
They both actually complimented each other very well vocally.
It was
so good.
epic. Yeah, she was by far the best. Definitely have a girl crush on her now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was really fun. The only part I did not like about going to Palm Springs was driving alone. I don't think I've ever made that trip by myself.
Yeah, why did you drive? For some reason, this girl wanted to drive alone and go earlier than everybody else.
Can I tell you the
3
thought
hours
process?
by herself.
I'll tell you my thought process. I go, sometimes, you know, we talk a lot. Sophia and I are always communicating. We're always on FaceTime with our family, always talking on this podcast. I thought, you know, it might be nice to sit in the car and just talk to myself. And it made me more depressed.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're driving, because at least when you're not driving, you're a passenger. You can go on your phone. You can
Yeah.
kind of like play with the music. You're
And
pretty
I didn't
silent.
listen to any music the whole time.
That's kind of weird. That's just your problem.
I know.
I mean, what do
I
you do
know.
in a long car ride like that? You have to have someone with you.
I was just making checklists in my head. I was making pros and con lists in my head. I was
sounds
making hit lists in
terrible.
my head.
That sounds terrible. I was with my boyfriend driving over, and we just listened to Crime Junkie, all of the crime podcasts.
Why do
That was so much fun.
couples bond over crime anything? Crime documentaries, crime
Yeah.
podcasts. you don't ever watch it alone, but when you're in a relationship, it's almost like a sweet thing people do with each other.
I know, it's like a weirdly romantic
Yeah.
type of thing to bond over. Well, it's especially in a long car ride, you're just trying to figure out who the murderer is. And he thinks it's funny because I can't help but make comments on every single part of the problem. There was one where someone was killing a guy and like they were trying to figure out the clues, and I'm just there saying, how did you not know?
Sophia, let me tell you, if you're ever in her presence, listening or watching a movie or doing something of that matter, she is the most annoying commentator ever. She talks the whole time.
Yeah.
We'll be just past the credits of a film and she'll say, what's going on?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm at the
I was
same
like,
point as you. I don't know.
Like, what's the story about? Why are there all these names
Who's
here?
this guy? I'm like, we just met him. I don't know.
Does he have kids? No, I know, I do, because I just am so curious. I just want to know what's going on. I'm one of those people,
Yeah.
I can't not, ambiguous stuff doesn't work for me, relationship-wise,
But Sophia,
friendship-wise.
I understand
anything.
wanting to know the plot,
I
but
just
if
wanna know
you
everything.
and I are on the same point where we both don't know what it is, I can't give you answers.
I know. I have to. I know. I'm just expecting you to all of a sudden have more clarity than I do
Yes.
on all the situations.
I have to
but-
say though, after this crazy weekend, nothing made me happier than parking my butt on my cloud couch, having pimple cream on my face.
Humble
and-
brag.
Yeah, humble brag. I spent all my money on a cloud couch. Anyway, sitting there, pimple cream on my face in a bathrobe, watching the Met Gala. Everyone looking their best glam, and I felt like an actual slob kebab.
Wait,
but it was really
back
nice.
up. You said that everyone at the Met looked their best.
To what they interpret
I'm going
as
to
their
tell you,
best.
if any of you guys went to the Met, you all did not look good. I'm sorry. Like, that was just not a good outfit. You thought they were good. I would say
Shade.
Hailey Bieber looked great.
Well, she always looks good. You know what? Hailey,
don't think Kendall
Hailey
Jenner
needs
looked that
minimal
bad.
anything. Kendall always looks good. But you're talking about models here. People that aren't models, sometimes it's harder to pose to get the glam right. Sometimes, what if you're in an
Well, no,
outfit?
I'm not talking about randoms that are showing up. I'm talking about people that have had professionals and designers design their dress for, and I just have to say, there was a theme. It's like gilded glamour. Gold, whatever it is. And it could have been such a great Met theme if everyone stuck to it.
I was hoping people would come out in more Bridgerton-esque attire.
That's what I was, me too.
Like someone
Even-
dressed as Marie Antoinette. Like that would have been so
Even
cool.
the Bridgerton people could have just worn their costumes to the event, and
Okay.
they didn't even wear it, and they wore something that was just so much more modern.
So now we're basically the fashion police of this podcast. Who do you think was the best dressed? I'm not gonna lie, random, but I thought, I wouldn't say she's best dressed, but I thought Julianne Moore looked very appropriate, very classy. She dressed for her age. I liked her hair.
Sure.
Okay.
I liked Kendall's outfit. I didn't like the bleached eyebrows. I
Okay.
hated Kylie's. I'm sorry. No shade to Kylie, but the backwards hat wasn't like
Everyone
wasn't
hated.
it.
Everyone hated
Yeah.
that one.
You know what I loved? Emma Chamberlain's outfit. I loved her outfit. I thought it was so cute, the crown, everything. I think she really killed it.
Well, she also has like a really good body.
Yeah.
So you could literally put anything on her and she'd make it look
True.
good.
I know this wasn't on theme at all, but like I thought Lori Harvey's dress was like really sexy and cool, but I don't think she dressed right
Yeah.
for the event.
I thought it was interesting. There's been a lot of debate because Kim Kardashian wore the Marilyn Monroe dress.
Oh, that's
but
right.
Khloe's looked pretty identical to it, and everyone's saying that Khloe looked a lot better than Kim.
Really? Did
Yeah.
you see that they came out with how she put on the dress?
Yeah.
I think didn't they rip it a little bit and like to adjust
no,
to her body?
they couldn't even zip the butt part.
No, I know. I think they kept that open. They stitched it or something. I didn't
Yeah.
really watch the whole thing, but I mean that is insane and shows how much power she has that she was able to actually take the actual Marilyn Monroe dress.
My favorite part,
Put
though,
on
about
herself.
watching the entire Met was seeing all of the ex-couples show up, sometimes with different people, sometimes not. And for me, I was playing like a puzzle game in my head saying, okay, Austin Butler just walked in and he used to date Vanessa Hudgens. They're here together. Jacob Elordi's here and he's
Kaya.
single, but Kaya's there with Austin Butler. And I was
and then
like,
Shawn Mendes is there.
Shawn
but
Mendes,
then
Camila Cabello. And then I was like, Phoebe Bridgers and Pete Davidson. And I was
oh,
like,
I didn't even think of that
Yeah,
one.
and-
That's
and
pretty
I
crazy.
was thinking, there's no better place on the planet to run into your ex than at the Met. You have glam, you have a gown on, and if you feel your best, like, psh,
No,
Are you
I know. That
look
is
at
like,
me.
I know, exactly. That is the time to show up and show to your ex that you are doing better off of them. Austin Butler looked great. Just had to note that.
That's my top pick of the night.
He
What
looked pretty great.
is that man drinking?
We don't know.
Fountain of Youth, maybe?
We said we didn't like blondes.
He's
He's
exception.
an exception.
I also
looked
think
great.
Vanessa Hudgens did look really good.
She looked
too.
great as well.
Do I think they'd look good together?
Yeah, they would look really cool together.
I do.
I know.
I really do.
I do agree with that. But yeah, I don't know. It didn't surprise me. I was really expecting more. But I actually, just to change topics, I don't know if you knew where I was yesterday. I sat by myself. I never do this, but I went to a random coffee shop
I
just
feel
to
like
study.
you do this a lot.
Well, I say I go to. Oh, actually, that's so true.
You do it a lot.
That's so true. Everyone, I encourage you to just go to a random coffee shop and work by yourself. I never do that really, like for work. I'll go get a book or drink coffee or wine, whatever. But it was so much fun just people watching and sitting outside.
I
got so much things done.
promise you, I will never be one of those girls sitting at a cafe for multiple hours using free Wi-Fi working on my computer.
Why? Why would
whenever
you wanna not
walk
move?
into like a Starbucks and you see those people just sitting there?
You don't walk. The Starbucks that's the place you avoid. You don't. That's like obviously a stereotype.
So you want like
don't
an
wanna go there.
aesthetic coffee shop?
Yes.
Okay.
You need like
To
a
each
pretty.
their own.
Yeah, you need like a pretty one that maybe makes like a drink that looks a little purple and fun.
Oh.
Yeah, you gotta like have
Treat
a little-
yourself to
like
a
little bit more
$17
Instagram.
drink.
Yeah, Instagrammable cafe, but it was fun actually getting out and like watching everybody on their computer doing some sort of work.
I think it's important to sort of break your routine and do something that you wouldn't normally do.
Something just happened above us, and I think it's haunted.
Ooh.
Yeah, ooh. Okay, so we have a really exciting guest on today that Sistine was really awesome and found. She is so cool.
Yes, her name is Shan. She's sort of a relationship, intimacy expert. Sophia and I love this topic so much. And I also think you guys like to hear it because most of your listener questions are about relationships,
Yeah.
intimacy, even being confident without someone. And I'm just stoked to talk to her. I've listened to a lot of her episodes. A lot of her guests are really cool. So we're going to have a real, vulnerable, honest conversation. And I cannot wait. So stay tuned for Shan. All right, guys, today we have an author, intimacy educator, and sexologist who describes herself as Dr. Ruth meets Rihanna. That's pretty epic. Using her podcast, Lovers and Friends, and her multiple social media platforms, she teaches people how to be more confident in and out of relationships while giving sex advice, dating, love, and everything in between. This is Shan Boodram. Oh my God.
That was reading, bitch. That was great.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't breathe that whole time.
We get nervous doing these intros for people.
They're
because
very nerve-wracking.
They are.
No,
'Cause-
but I'll tell you, Sophia and I only get nervous introing someone that we're really excited about.
Yeah.
We're really excited
We're
to
so
have you
excited.
If you don't care, you're like, if I say something
Yeah.
wrong, you'll get over it.
Exactly.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Well,
And
thank you for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You know, a lot of people, it's hard to get people to come on the show, and you followed up with me, and you were so sweet and so kind, and you were on it, and I was like, wow, like a lot of people don't try to make an effort, so we really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh,
and
listen, I
looking
have a
so
podcast
beautiful.
too.
You get it.
I know how hard, or people say yes, but that yes means like secretly in brackets 2027.
Yes.
But they don't
Yes.
like say that. So then
Yes.
you're like following up with them. It can be a lot. So I get it when you're just like, no, I'm trying to have an interesting conversation.
Totally.
I love
Yeah.
the conversation you guys have here. So I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks.
actually, I have to say, the way I actually found you was you were on Too Hot to Handle.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know
God,
what's like
that's right.
when people say like the way that I found you, do you hold your breath because you're like, what are they going to say
What did
next?
I say?
Yeah,
Like, where
I mean,
was I?
Yeah.
I
Like, where did I go? I don't even
So I
remember.
saw
this.
you on RedTube,
I
and
saw you like drunk at a club one time.
yeah.
You're just like, where did you see
Thought it was
me?
more subtle.
No,
Yes.
but you were giving a seminar to the ladies about talking to their cookie.
Yoni.
Yoni,
Yes.
we call it Yoni.
You can call it whatever you want. That's
Whatever
the
you
joy.
want. We
yeah.
call it shishi. We call it anything. But I really thought that was so epic, and I tried to do it myself, and I just felt super uncomfortable. But I really
did?
liked. Yeah.
Oh,
I
hell
really
yeah.
liked what you had to say about it. I mean, you said that there's some power in talking to it and sort of, making it your best friend. But do you think that really helps when you talk to your yoni?
I mean, you can create the relationship however you want to, which is the amazing thing about relationships is identifying like what brings you joy, what gives you strength. And so I think for a lot of people who have vulvas and a lot of people that identify as women in general, you're sort of like I have a 1.5-year-old daughter, and every time her diaper comes off, she grabs her vulva.
Right.
And
Really?
she knows eyes, nose, ears, mouth, vulva. Because I'm like, you identify it. But there are some of us who grew up like, don't touch that.
Right.
Don't look at that. That's a bad part. So you are encouraged not to have this relationship. You're encouraged to disassociate and to associate it with shame. So for someone like that, it can be helpful as you get older to be like, what's up?
Right.
Like, I don't think I've ever really like formally introduced
Exactly.
myself because I've been told to ignore you. Like I did a YouTube video once about women, different ways that women orgasm. And someone was saying that like them and their sister were playing with like hoses when they were like 6 or 7. And she goes to her sister, like, take the hose and put it on your hoo-ha or cookie or
No
whatever, where
way.
they said it feels amazing. And they weren't saying it like in a sexual way. It was
But
just
they were
like,
just like-
it's a fact of life.
Yeah, they felt
like
it.
this
It feels
feels
good.
great.
Yeah.
That feels great. And then the older sister, you know, who had probably gone through a bit more socialization was like, don't ever say that. Don't ever talk about that. Do not do that. That is bad. That's a bad body part. So for that individual, getting to a place where it's like, this is a good body part. And like, I'm sorry for ignoring you, or I'm sorry for labeling you as bad, or letting other people's assumptions about you dictate how we connect. Talking can be helpful.
Definitely.
You know, now you're become like this person that is breaking the norm and the stereotype and the shame behind knowing your body and understanding like something that we all kind of go through, which is like, this is something a part of ourselves that we haven't even explored. What made you even want to start becoming the voice for people that don't really have a voice or even know what questions to ask?
I think there's always like two kinds of people who come into any purpose in life, right? Like there's the people who it's like, it was so good for me. So I want other people to learn because I know a lot. I've experienced the right way and I want whatever quote unquote right is. And I want to guide others. And then there's people who are like, yo, it fucking sucked for me.
Right.
And I made so many mistakes. I put myself in so many negative situations.
Yeah.
So in essence, I'm that person. Like I started learning about sex because I had a super shitty teen sex life. I had every negative experience you can have under the books, zero orgasms, no connection, a lack of understanding of my body. I thought my clitoris was something that was like inside, which is why in porn, you know, women scream so much. So I'm like, when I find the right penis that's curved
It'll
the right
hit the
way,
right spot.
it'll find that button. Like those, and I was like having sex thinking that. So I'm like, if I didn't know so much and I was so misinformed, there has to be other people. So I educated myself first out of need. And then I was like, wow, someone else should be offering this information. And I was like, bitch, why can't that someone else be you?
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
I see the following you have from it. It's like a lot of people, most people are curious about it. And I feel like it's just hard to know where to even start. And you guys, you just go back to even the basics. I actually saw a video the other day I was stalking you on your Instagram. And you even went on and you were talking about just how to kiss. Like just even stuff like that where people like, no one told me about it or even anything. Like I was
True. Sophia and I did look up a YouTube video, how to make out, because we genuinely, that's the problem. We go to school, the sex ed didn't really exist for us. We were afraid to even talk about our body parts as kids and what felt good and what anything was. And I mean,
Are you guys great maker-outers?
I think
can I
now,
actually say yes?
But
I know I am. I pride myself in it.
You know, because we were so uneducated in just the basics of everything, I didn't believe that I was good at anything until I was told I was good at anything.
Yeah, that's actually true.
So, do you have a lot of people coming to you for advice? I don't know how to do this. I'm embarrassed that I can't do that.
It's getting better. I mean, I've been in this space now for 18 years. It's a really long time.
Wow.
So when I first started, I don't think that the search engines or information wasn't as vast. So my job was actually a lot easier back in the day because people would be like, I don't know how to orgasm. I was like, let me introduce you to the clitoris.
Right,
and then like, oh,
exactly.
I've never heard that word before.
Right.
Or like, oh, I want to try anal, but it hurts. And I'm like, oh, you've got 2 sphincters. And so now so much of that is Googleable or you would have
Right.
seen
Yeah.
a video. So the questions I get are not usually as simple as like, how do I do this one thing? I want to kiss better. You know, what's the how-to? Because you would have just looked it up on YouTube or
Right.
Googled it. The question you're going to ask me is like, when I was 5.
Right,
And then like
right,
paragraphs
right,
of
right,
pages.
right.
So like all the more nuances that come with it, which, you know, makes my job more interesting, but definitely more difficult and also never ending. Sometimes people say to me like, oh, like, how can you talk about that every day for so long? I'm like, there's a billion different versions that each person has on this planet. There's always things to explore and understand. I'm still learning every day.
No, there's so many things to learn. And I think that the hardest part about all of this is really finding a source or a person
Can I put my foot on the couch?
Oh, yeah,
I think I
please.
keep like trying to like find
No, go do anything
find
you
my
want.
way.
Sit any way you want. This is Unwaxed, but you can go any way you want. Okay, so my thing is, like, I remember growing up not knowing really anything about my body. My parents really talked about it with me. It was like that's their generation. I had younger sisters. And I think the hardest part is really researching and finding, because when you go on these sites, it's pretty intimidating. I mean, you're just looking at scientific sources, and they're mostly written by men. And so you don't really know what you're reading is going to be accurate. So if I was someone now, like, trying to figure out or ask these questions, where do I go? Like, who do I talk to? Where do I start? That if I didn't know that you existed yet, you know, like, now if I was you, like, or me today, and I didn't know, I'd probably go to your page and, like, really research.
That's the great thing is I think that there's actually so many different options now. So I might represent information for some people, but other people may have more specific needs or questions that I'm not answering. So I love the fact that I started in this space a while ago where if I said I talk about sex for a living, people were like, what? As if I said, oh, I talk about disco ball. I mean, the jukeboxes for a living. And you're like, you made a job out of that? That's so obscure. But now so many more people have broken into the field. It's become a lot more widespread. We were watching the show recently, Bel Air, and there was a house of influencers. And one of the influencers was like a sex and relationship expert. And my husband was like, that is so based on you, da-da-da-da-da. But I was like, funny. That's just to me like how much the field has broken open now.
Very
so
true.
That to be said, is probably still difficult, sure. But I think it's a lot easier now to identify, like, here's who I can learn from if my parents didn't.
Yeah.
I would thought that I guess because you grew up with a lot of exposure, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I would have thought your parents would have taught or told you a lot really early on.
Our parents were more so, and I mean, we don't talk to anything about our dad and wives, but with our mom, she was always one of those people that never judged. If we had any questions, she would answer them. But
she's also like a little petunia. She's very petite and like delicate, and she doesn't want to talk about anything like too much or too vulgar with us, especially when we were younger. So I think Sophia and I really had to come together and work on it with each other. Like, okay, you kiss someone for the first time, Sophia, tell me everything I need to know.
Yeah, but it's funny because now today, if we want to talk to our mom about anything, she's so open about it and she loves it. But that was because we kind of reinforced it with her.
You created the culture.
We created the culture in our family, and so now we are just like open books.
Do you think that it's the parents' responsibility to inform their kids at an earlier age about these things, or do you think that, you know, it's sort of 50% each, the child and the parents' responsibility?
Oh, it's definitely the parents, but I mean, it's generational.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I empathize with my mom. My mom had this kind of same approach. My mom was very much like, don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
My parents applied the ask me anything, way.
Great.
It is great, but it's also a lot of pressure on the kid to initiate the conversations and to know what to ask.
Yeah.
And to not know what the
what's the boundaries also.
Exactly.
With your parents. Yeah.
I always make this joke that like my mom was like, yeah, you can ask me anything. But my mom positioned herself as somebody who was like, I was 18 with the love of my life, had my first sexual experience. And then I met your father.
Yes,
everything is great. And then I'm like, oh man, like I fucked a carrot last night. I'm 14. Like, how do I tell this person?
It's like my mom, she goes, your dad was my second boyfriend aside from my high school boyfriend. So Sophia and I are like, oh my God, weird. Are we doing this wrong?
Right. Yeah. I'm like, I'm 12 and I've already passed you.
No, oh my God.
Yeah, I think that there is such almost shame behind sexuality and dating and numbers. And numbers is something that I'd really like to get into, because a lot of men, I mean, maybe women too, but my experience with men is they make you feel bad about what your number is. If it's too high, you're a slut. If it's too low, you're a prude and won't put out. So, I mean, can we just like get into that? Have you ever experienced that? What's your advice when, you're asked what your number is? Because I've been asked that question and I've been told just lie and make up a number or say what you think that they want to hear. I mean, I don't know.
It's interesting that there was a time in my life where I literally woke up every single day and thought about my quote unquote body count. Yeah. I memorized my number. And it would be, I was dating, so it was at the forefront of like, if they ask, what do I say? If you ask me today, genuinely, I have a ballpark. But like, you just kind of forget because I'm like, what's really the point? If you ask me how many people I've kissed, I'm like, hey, I don't know, someone.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Who knows at this point?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like if I thought about it, I'm sure I can come up with a number. And I know so many men who in particular don't know their number either, kind of for the same reason, because they're not obsessed with like thinking about it.
Right.
So I think to catch-22, is there some value? Because knowing someone's ballpark could tell you a lot about their sexual ethics.
Right.
But also too, there's probably more to the story. So for example, for me, I had 7 sexual partners by the time I was like 19, maybe 18.
Right.
And that was the bulk of my sexual activity because I was searching for that magic penis to find the clitoris, right? So that, if I told you my number, I'm like, the bulk of it though happened within the first year and a half of me becoming sexual. So that isn't necessarily reflective of the way that I have sex or who I have sex with today. So I get it from like that standpoint, that if your number is 200, that communicates to me that like, oh, you have multiple sexual partners, you're very sexual liberal. And now I have additional questions like, what's your sexual health status? How often do you get checked? Furthermore, do you think there's an overlap between my friend circle and your friend circle that could make things awkward? Which that's actually the heart of the question to me, is like, hey, how is this going to like impact my health and also like my social health? But it's just a little stupid. It was actually, I had this funny conversation with somebody who was like, I could definitely tell when a woman's had multiple sexual partners.
What? How can you tell?
It's just looser. And I was like, so you got a small dick.
Yeah.
And then he was like, what?
This is the craziest myth I've ever heard. I don't know how people believe this.
Well, it's crazy to say to a pregnant woman who's already had a kid, because like, what are you insinuating about my vagina, right? So he was like, you can tell because it's looser. I was like, oh, you have a small dick. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, that means if someone's had multiple partners, most of their partners are bigger than you. So when you go in, you're like,
that's too bad.
And then he was like, no. I'm like, okay, now you don't like it. So when it impacts your character, something about you.
Exactly.
It has more to do. Are there differences in people's size? I'm sure there are, but it has to do with one, compatibility of penis size and vaginal size, and has more to do with the strength of your pelvic floor muscles than probably number of partners.
And it's called Kegels, right? That you do the tighter.
Yes.
I know. I've heard of that. You're supposed to do that at every stoplight. That's what someone told me.
Yes.
Is that what the thing is?
Well, I've heard like when you're, when you're doing the turn signal, it's like,
Oh my God, that's so
genius.
Do I do it? No, but.
No, I know. I don't either.
never remember. I think that most people that feel insecure with their body, especially during sex, sometimes it comes from comments like that where, others project their insecurity on you and then you feel almost ashamed. Because I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with guy friends and girlfriends that they're embarrassed about this, the way this looks, or they're embarrassed about their performance, or they come too quickly or whatever it may be, only because someone else has made them feel really bad about it. Do you have any advice for people that just, one, need help accepting who they are and being confident in who they are in their bodies?
Yeah, I mean, certain things obviously take more explanation. We all have these ideas of what's good and what's bad, what's clean and what's dirty when it comes to sex. You have to be aware of that. I might talk to people who have STIs like herpes, where in that it's difficult for them to find partners who are accepting, but you have to also acknowledge that we're in a culture that doesn't promote these conversations and isn't very aware about what that is. So should I judge every person that I meet who doesn't get it? Or do I empathize and be like, it sucks that we're in this culture that promotes these ideals that are really harmful and not actually based in fact. So there's a mix of both of like, if you come very quickly, for example, there's a book that I love that's called She Comes First, and it was written by Dr. Ian Kerner. And essentially he was a premature ejaculator, and he felt all this shame and guilt around him. Then did the research and was like, wait a second, penetration isn't even the primary way that majority of people with vulvas get off. So why am I making this the focal point of my sexual performance? He had a conversation with his wife, and his wife was like, I don't really come from penetration anyways. And he's like, cool, let me get better at other things that are more within my body's capacity and capabilities. So it can be like, it's good to acknowledge, where your shortcomings, I say shortcomings with a grain of salt, like in the realm of what society thinks is good and bad. And then also to like find workarounds and then choose people who can be a part of solution-based dialogues.
So do you think that it also takes, because sometimes I feel like when you've had sexual partners and maybe you feel insecure, that you almost like kind of, for females, like lost your feminine energy, and you feel like that like divine sense of self, like that confidence.
Oh, that's a good question.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does it take a partner to also encourage that and bring that to you?
Because what if you just stop feeling sexy or sexual and you're like, wow, I just lost all my mojo?
I mean, like anything else in the world, if you're like, oh man, my elbow hurts, bad example, but you just troubleshoot, right? So you kind of figure out, am I sitting in a weird way that's causing it to do that? Am I hanging out with somebody who's putting me in positions for my elbow to be sore? Am I actively doing things? Do I need to get a brace? So it's all just troubleshooting. So like for that particular case, you can be like, what's changed, right? So are there circumstantial changes I can make? Are there people? Because I think it's also important too. We live in a self-help culture right now, right? Of like, it's you, like, love yourself, choose yourself, think you're sexy first, which is important, but it's a piece of the puzzle because like,
it's a
hey, I don't
thing.
live alone.
Yeah.
And I think there's a thing called reciprocal determinism, which means like, I might be one way towards you guys because you're being nice to me, right? Like if I came in here, Sistine, and you were like being closed off and a bitch, my energy towards you would be different. So it's like I'm showing up for you in reciprocity to how you're showing up with me. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's not that you need to do the work. You need to be nicer. You need to love yourself more. And it's more like, nah, I'm hanging around people who are not really supporting me in this way. So I got to either let them know and ask them for what I need or to find other people and places.
So how do you find the confidence to ask your guy or girl, whoever you're dating, what you need? And because I think sometimes, like, if you bring up maybe if it's involving sex or if maybe it's involving something personal with yourself, it's a little bit of an uncomfortable situation. They could take it personally. You don't really know how to approach it. How do you word it, or how do you just say to your partner, like, we need to have this talk because this is what I need to fix, or this is something that would make me feel better in bed, or this is gonna, like, how do you do it without hurting the other person or making them feel like it's a them problem when it's, do you know how I'm trying to word it?
Yes. I mean, there's no perfect answer to this. I like am in a major argument with somebody because I told my truth to them and they got really offended by how I told my truth. So I'm not the expert on like, here's the perfect way to tell people news. It's uncomfortable. It's a troubleshooting process, but ultimately on the other side of that dialogue, it's better for you.
Right.
Like I said, this is a person that I'm in a tiff with right now wherein they're like, I feel so hurt. I feel so this. And I was like, totally. But I've been feeling this way for like months.
Right.
So you feel it now today because I brought it to your attention.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, like is the person that I tell like, hey, I'm not orgasming or I don't feel sexy around you or I feel like my sexual potential is limited by some of the judgments that you make or comments or the way that you expect me to show up in the bedroom. That's uncomfortable for that person in the moment. But like, I've been having bad sex with you for fucking 4 years.
And that's, okay.
So that's the trade-off
and
you have to
like
balance.
To touch on that. At that point when it's just not clicking for you and maybe it's clicking for them, but probably not the last 1 or 2 times, is there anything you can really do to salvage it or sort of reverse the effects? Or is it sort of just, we're not compatible?
Oh, 100% you could salvage it. Oh. If somebody was willing to learn and adjust,
Yes,
if they have a learner's mindset.
Yeah.
Have you ever like had someone tell you you're doing something wrong that you're like, I didn't even realize that wasn't on my radar.
Totally.
Yeah.
So sometimes for people that's not even on their radar. I mean, myself and my husband like have literal like textbook classic uncomfortable conversations and we've had them publicly and I think it's helpful for people to see that modeled. Like I literally have to ask him like, do you know what a compliment is? Can you apply it to me? And he's like, but I think these things all the time, or I show them in these ways. I'm like, no, I need to hear it. You know,
it's
and
like love language.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we talked about that like in terms of foreplay. Like his perception of foreplay is like 20 minutes before sometimes. But I'm like, I need the little touches all day long.
Right. Yeah.
I need like when I walk by, you're like, that ass though. And then I'm like, oh, and then 10 hours later. Because otherwise, when you try to initiate with me and it's been very like sort of stoic and transactional all day, and then you try initiate me at night, I don't have the energy because I'm not really energized in that sexual way.
100%. I think first of all, foreplay is totally overlooked, and also I think that a lot of people, I'm just gonna say men because that applies to what I'm used to. They often mimic what their previous partner or partners liked for foreplay. Maybe the girls didn't like foreplay. Maybe they didn't need it. And so they just think that you need the same.
Right.
And so having that conversation and saying, no, actually, I need this. I mean, it only gets better. And if it gets worse, then that's a whole different set of
That's
problems.
actually the more helpful piece of information.
Yeah.
Not that like this person doesn't magically know what I want. Because in a healthy relationship, hopefully there are some places that you're like, we flow. Or else you wouldn't have gotten together.
Right.
Like I didn't have to explain to them what my hobbies are. They just got it. I didn't have to explain to them like my value system around God because they just got it. We aligned there.
I was gonna ask you this question because, like, congratulations, you're also on your second baby. She's a girl.
Second baby.
It's so exciting. And you said you were with your partner for 4 years so far, right?
Kind of 2015, so like somewhere in the 7-ish.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So were you guys together before you started doing this? And then was he always just initially really attracted to like the whole, like, because some guys get intimidated about females that talk about sex publicly and then also talk about their sex that they have and make that an example. How did that even start? Like, how did you know that he was going to be kind of like the quote one for you?
The interesting thing about my relationship is that it didn't build in that like you just know way. You're
Right.
like, you just know when you meet that person.
Yeah, when you know, you know.
no,
So it was more like, oh, I really want to fuck this guy. Like that's
Okay,
like the precipice
interesting.
of how we got
Yeah.
together. But that to be said, at the time that I met him, I was looking for a fuck buddy. I'm not from America. I was like on the fritz of being deported, so I couldn't legally work, and I just came out of a toxic relationship. So I was not ready to enter into like anything substantial. But I did know that at the time I had just finished school for sexology. I learned all this amazing stuff, and I wanted to invite pleasure in my life.
Okay.
So I was like specifically looking for a friends with benefits. And the reason why I was like, oh, this is the person I want to engage in this with is that like a lot of men in particular, if I'd say like, oh, I study or talk about sex for a living, they're like, what's your education? Where did you go to school? You know, how long have you been doing it? So it becomes like a jockeying thing of,
Right.
oh, like they're trying to
What's your
assess
qualifications?
if I can have sex with their girlfriend better than them.
Right.
There's this is like, there's a need to, and also too,
got
like,
it. Okay.
there's a lack of interest and curiosity. Whereas in my husband, Jared, he was like, I was so intrigued by you. And he's like, I'm gonna be very honest. I wanted to have sex with you so I could be better for other people. So he came into
really?
it like, you studied sex for a living? Amazing. Let me use
Teach
this
me.
girl to
Educate
learn,
me,
right?
yeah.
So he was
Okay.
always fascinated. Like that's at the root of, I didn't talk publicly at the time I did, but like not obviously at the platform or level I'm at now.
Yeah.
And that's how he knew me. He initially had DM'd me at some point to say, I like your work, but it was like for, 10 people. But
Totally.
he was very much like interested. So I
Right.
always say when people ask that question of like,
Right.
I'm sure you get asked that too, like,
Yeah.
how do you find somebody who's not
Right.
intimidated? It's
Right.
like, one, that person finds you, and two, you kind of know because you probably have so much experience
Right.
meeting men who feel minimized by you or
Right.
are intimidated by your family. And so that comes up pretty early,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
radar is probably really high for that.
You said you were in a toxic relationship previously. So what were the things that you saw in the last toxic relationship that were completely different from the one you were in now? And you were like, okay, this is polar opposite. This is going to be a healthier relationship than what I had before.
Base rate for me, like my husband thinks I'm a good person and always evaluates me as a good person first. Where I think in my last relationship, he was constantly trying to look for like,
Problems.
you're bad or you're bad
Yeah.
because of this. And a lot of it came from his own bad behaviors and then trying to justify why he did manipulative things or
Right.
cheated or
Right.
he was like trying to point the blame rather than being like, I have some work to do. So that at a base rate, when I knew that Jared was my life partner, I was like, I don't ever feel like I have to qualify myself for you.
Right.
Or I have to audition for you to like see the good in me.
Right. Yeah.
And that was a big difference. And also Jared has like a learner's mindset.
That's really important because
yes.
being with someone that's willing to learn and adjust and also able to teach you things, I think is some of the most important qualities in a relationship. But going back to what you were just saying, why do you think that we often try really hard to make the toxic person in the relationship like us more when deep down, like women have a very good intuition and we
Yes.
know in our gut that something isn't right, but we still try to make it work. So why do you think sometimes we stay in it when we know it's not right for us?
This is like the most slippery slope question because it's my favorite topic and I could monologue.
Let's slip. Let's get into
only
it.
just because like I think like what's something that you guys have learned scientifically that you know inside out, like nutrition or fitness or is it
Yeah, we could say fitness.
Yeah, fitness, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
when you
nutrition.
learn about different body types, and so if I come to you and I'm like, I've been on the treadmill for 3 years and I can't, and you're like, oh, here's why.
Yeah,
Right. So
totally.
it's like when you don't understand the biological basis for things, then you can find yourself spinning in place or
Yeah.
like in the dirt trying to figure shit out where it's like, no, like your body's actually set up as an evolutionary flaw in many cases for that. So
Yeah.
love is the same thing where like we're born to bond. It is love is a function of evolution. So you're driven to love. So it's people think of love as a feeling, but feelings change and go. I'm having a good time right now. If you guys
Yeah.
poured water in my face, I'd be mad.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but love is present regardless. So it's actually more of a neurological condition. And so any condition, obviously, if the circumstances aren't ideal, cannot be favorable for you. So it's an addiction. So
Yeah.
the fucked up thing that actually happens too in like a toxic relationship is that your attachment system, when you feel like you're in danger, you want to move towards people that your brain has identified as like loving individuals,
Right.
which can actually be the person who hurts you.
Right.
So it's this weird push and pull of like for whatever reason, my brain decided you're my individual. I made a pair bond with you.
Right.
We now you're an addiction for me.
Yeah.
But later on, I start to feel like harm from you and danger from you. And in those moments of danger, initially, I might go into fight or flight where I move away from you. But then my brain wants to be around the people that are within my attachment system, so I'm drawn back to you. So like your own brain creates this system that makes it very difficult for you to get out of toxic relationships because your brain doesn't care if you're happy. Your brain just works off of like, again, an outdated survival mode. So that to be said, I encourage everybody. It was the most freeing thing for me coming out of my toxic relationship to learn about love from a sociological and a scientific perspective. Because I was like, oh my God, like, this is why.
Yeah, I totally get that. But sometimes I find myself, I'll speak for myself, that when I was dating a really toxic, I'll say people, multiple people, they were often the ones that it took me the longest to get over.
Yes.
And it was the hardest year and a half. And then the ones that treat you really good, it's like we're almost able just to sort of move on, start dating again in 2 months. Did you find that with your toxic relationships, or because you educated yourself and you became self-aware coming out of them that you were able to sort of stop that obsessive pattern of, you know, why won't he love me? Why didn't he accept me? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, the toxic ones, I think, again, like they play on your psyche, so they're going to have a longer hold on you. And they probably didn't end because you had naturally decided that it was, you know, it was over. It was because you had to rip yourself free of it. So the other ones that are like more peaceful or, you know, better quote unquote people, you probably just got to a place over time of like, yeah, I just fundamentally don't think that we're good together. Whereas in these relationships, you're like, I know you're not good for me, but I'm also like heavily addicted to you. And then there's also like the sunk cost fallacy or the casino effect that happens where you've invested so much in somebody.
I was gonna say so much time into somebody that you're like, I just wasted so much time, but you don't want to realize that. That you wasted all your energy on someone that wasn't reciprocating any of that love back in the way that you should deserve it.
And you could be like, on the other side of this, is there a better version of you? And that's what I've been waiting for this whole time. And if I leave now, what if the next person who comes gets that version of you? And so I think there's just so much more at play psychologically. It's really fascinating to me because I have somebody in my life who works with me. And so I often hear about people's love lives. And he is such a classic textbook fuckboy. And every time he listens to one of my podcast episodes, he's like, oh, I'm a gaslighter. He's like, I do that. And he's like becoming privy to these words, but like kind of serendipitously learned without knowing what the language is. Like, what are the techniques that allow me to continue my bad behavior in order to get the best out of people? And people, you have to kind of acknowledge that too, that like, yeah, some people genuinely are literally fucking with you on purpose.
Yes. And I also think, I know this will never happen, but if you are a fuckboy or you are a gaslighter or even a fuck girl, right? It's better just to be upfront and you know what you're doing and you know the games that you're playing and you know that you're toying people along, but to act like someone else just to get you or satisfy you or sort of win a game in your head and then do something completely different. I mean, that's when I think it's the hardest for people to, because you're like, who is this person? Maybe I can try to fix them. And then not everyone is fixable.
Yes. And I could say from like, I've had this conversation with that person multiple times, like just be open and upfront. But for them, that person believes that there's a chance of a relationship. They believe in exclusivity. So they invest in gifts for that person. They invest in sexual exclusivity for them, which they prize that, you know. So I think that as much as it's like, just be honest, that person's like, yeah, but if I'm honest, I might lose. Because right now I'm getting everything that I want. Except for people enjoying the experience of being with me, which I value very much. Like you're creating a dynamic where, yes, people are giving you time, attention, money, sex, whatever, but they're like very uncomfortable within it. And you probably argue a lot. But you don't really prioritize that as much as you prioritize the things that you're getting. So the unfortunate thing I had to kind of come to is like, we kind of want to believe that everybody's good. I mean, good is such a bad word.
No, it's so true.
No, you want to believe the best and the worst of people. Like, you don't want to believe that someone can be as bad as they can be.
Yes.
And it's hard to believe, especially when you are yourself someone that isn't a manipulative person and all you really want at the end of the day is love, that someone can truly do that and intentionally do that to you.
It's like when you've been conned with money. And you're like, no one would really set up a false business to trick old people out of their hard-earned pension. Yes, they
Yes,
fucking
they
do.
can.
Or even like people stealing out of your bag. You're like, no one's actually gonna pickpocket me and take my
Until it
wallet and my
does.
credit.
Because I would never want that to happen to somebody else or me. So why would I do that? But like that person, that is it. So I think that's a kind of a part of the breaking free of the cycle too, of acknowledging that like, yeah, there are genuinely people out there who are aware that they're being harmful, but they prioritize the benefits they get from that harm over that.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is.
Do you think also including sex and all of that, because love and then sex also that does release endorphins and things like that? And is it a fact that women bond or mate to people that they do have sex with more than men do?
Yeah,
Right?
oxytocin, which is like the cuddle hormone, the bonding hormone, it is actually released in orgasm, but the highest dose of it is actually released in after sex cuddling.
Really?
That's when the pair bond happens.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that can be helpful too if you're trying to engage in like a consensual, sexual, strictly only sexual relationship.
Right.
Is to really put in firm boundaries. I had that with my husband when we were just fuck buddies. We never, ever, ever did sleepovers.
Oh, really? So no sleepovers and no
Because-
cuddling to not
Because you
that.
wanted to make it clear that this is just what it is. We're not trying to produce feelings for each other.
I also didn't want my body to outsmart me. Where like,
Ooh, yeah, it does
right. That's
that.
true.
Yeah, where now I'm a slave to feelings that I didn't consciously want for myself.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
it's like with food, right?
Yeah.
Some people can have candies and treats in the house, and some people are like, I can't even buy it because if it's there, I'll eat it.
Yes.
You have to learn how to outsmart yourself, just knowing your tendencies.
Right.
So going
That's
off
me
of
with ice cream.
quote unquote.
Literally last night.
Literally.
You're like,
Yeah.
I can't even. No.
I can't. No, I actually have absolutely zero self-control. I'm like one of those people. Like, if I have it in the house, I will eat the whole bag. I'm like, if there's a plate of
There's
food,
nothing wrong with
even if I'm full-
indulging.
Well, there
No.
is. I consider myself to be like a love addict. Like, obviously, I love love,
Oh,
which is
I'm
why I got
such
in
a
bed
love
to this
addict.
place.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
if I don't put protections in place for myself, and I'm also a little bit of an egomaniac. I went through a period of time where like every dude that I dated was like, you're my soulmate. And that felt really good for me. Even if I didn't feel the way towards them.
Right.
I'm like, affirm me as being great. But then I'm like, if I meet somebody who knows how to play with that,
Okay.
Oh, right.
I can really get fucked.
I
Right.
need help with this because I will say yes to any person that will ask me out. I will convince myself that I like this person more than I actually do just because maybe I'm filling the void in my life that I'm lacking with a relationship with this person, but I know it's not right. What ways, because you just said that you had to put up protection for yourself. So in what ways in your life did you protect yourself that I can apply to mine?
You got to just find other healthy outlets. Like I love flirting. You know, I like flirting because I like
Flirting,
feeling
yes.
like sexy and
I
pretty.
love flirting.
We are huge
I'm in a relationship
flirts.
now, so I can't do it at all. But it's just, it was hard like in the beginning because that was something that I just used as a way to kind of get attention or just like
Enjoy life.
Enjoy life.
Yeah.
Like that was just fun for me. It wasn't
Yeah.
like something that I was
So
just trying to get attention.
flirting is one.
Well, you could find it, or you could find other ways because you could flirt with complete strangers, right? You could flirt with people who, you know, are of the gender that you're not necessarily attracted to.
Totally.
So you're still getting that kind of sexual
Yeah.
exchange. You know,
Right.
you might have a fake username where you just chat with people online. Like you find ways that you other
Yeah.
healthy outlets for you, or you post thirst traps on Instagram and your partner's okay with that, and you get flirty comments, and like that satisfies that part of yourself
Right.
without you
that
creating
all
those
the
direct relationships.
Totally.
Oh,
my
yeah.
God, I didn't even think of it that. Like there's different outlets, even sexually, just to do it that you can get satisfaction from them.
Yeah. And I think that for me, like I had to make that switch. I remember when I like became really aware in my 30s, dating became amazing because I was just really aware of myself and aware of like my
Do you think it gets
tendencies.
better as you get older?
Not necessarily, it's not about age, it's
No,
about
come on.
time.
Tell us it gets
well, it's
better.
time. Like somebody who's 3 years old in Cambodia knows more about Cambodia than me. So
Right.
it's not about
100%.
age. It's about how much time have you invested in understanding something.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I can meet a 17-year-old who's like, nah, my parents were on it. I've been reading psychological books. I've been going to sex ed class. And
Yeah.
that person might have figured shit out more than I have because they've been investing more time. I mean, I've been more years than 17, 18 I said, right?
Yeah,
So they have to be 18 in order for us to have that debate. But
Totally.
nonetheless, that to be said, I don't think it's about age. I think it's about investment of time. And I think at 30, I started my education at 18, and then I didn't actually start learning about relationships until 27. I was only focused on sex for the first bit, and then
Yeah.
I was like, well, what about intimacy?
Yeah.
So that 30, I was like, oh, I know my shit.
Right,
So I remember
right.
I went out on this date with this dude, and he was so hot, and he like washed my car for me.
What?
We had this really
Very
great
nice.
What did
time.
you do to get him to do that?
Just be myself, you
like,
know?
flirt.
Just like really,
Just really-
positive to be around.
I just get really happy when my wheels are shiny.
Exactly. And he took me to this rooftop and we were like looking out together and having a great time. And then all of a sudden he got like super sexual with me. And it just became like very clear that his agenda the entire time was that.
to do that, yeah.
And I was like, and I was really turned on, but I'm like, I have to leave and delete this person's
Right.
information
Yeah.
because I know, one, what kind of relationship is going to lead to.
Yeah.
I know that my ego might be like, but I'll prove to you that I'm so much more
Yeah.
and
Right.
that I'm special for washing my car just because I'm special.
Right.
And then I was like, why? When I can just delete it and
Right.
move on?
That's a really good point because I think a lot of people, and I know myself for sure, it's like you want to, again, perceive the best in people. So in my brain, I'd be like, but he did this nice thing for him, so I should like, let him continue with me. But if you cut off the cycle early, you're going to avoid a lot of damage and red flags later on. And I always say that like the red flags that you ignore in the beginning of the relationship are often the same ones that you
see
that
them
you break
later.
up with him
Yeah.
for. That's just the same reason.
Since you've had your podcast and now people are probably, they feel like they can like have more accessibility to like to ask you questions. What is the most common question about sex that you've received, even if it's super simple, that people have always frequently are curious about?
Yeah, I guess because I don't really get those common anymore of like specific things. I mean, more or less, it's some version of like, why won't this person love me, or why doesn't this work? Like, we've tried X, Y, and Z. We've done this configuration. This person won't commit, or I can't orgasm in this relationship. So it's people who've like done some form of troubleshooting on their own,
Right.
and then they're getting to a place where they're stuck because it's like beyond what they can Google or something simple.
Right.
So I think like I get asked this question all the time. I should just come up with some answer. Like, what's the most common question?
Well,
I'm
it's
like,
probably just back to the basics, honestly. It's probably things that people, it's not anything probably really complex other than like, I don't feel pleasure with my partner anymore, or I don't know how to feel
to
pleasure
keep
with
it
myself.
interesting.
And
Yes.
like even the kissing thing is like, people probably want to know kissing tips that improve their vocabulary, like what their knowledge is on it. And it's really interesting that at the end of the day, I think a lot of people just have the same curiosities.
yes, but instead of it being like, how do I kiss better? It'll be like, myself and my partner had our first kid, and as a result, they stopped kissing me because I now kiss the baby, and that feels weird to them. So we're trying to like reignite our
Oh,
kissing
interesting. I
style.
didn't-
And not that
that's
person. I'm
really-
making something
yeah.
up. But like,
No, but I
it's going to
mean,
be a
yeah.
question that's like that versus
Okay.
like, how do I kiss better? It won't be like,
Okay.
how do I have better anal? It won't be like, how do I learn my partner's love language? It's going to be like all these multidimensional things, which is
We
like,
should just send the love language test to our partner. Be like,
Yes.
Take it, tell us what you think. It's actually
Literally.
really fun. And I feel like a lot of people actually end up enjoying it once they take it. And they're like, oh, the more you know, I feel like it's once you open that door of potentially like them learning about themselves more. Because Christine and I've always been those people that we love to tell people to take these tests or just see
We're
what
very
they're...
vocal about like,
Yeah.
this is what we are. These are our zodiac signs. This is what we like.
Like,
And then when
even
we
the
don't get
goop
that
test-
back, we just send
Yeah, even that
quizzes.
we did that goop test that she had on Netflix with the whole like what's your sex preference and things like that. If it's like sensual or if it's kinky or if it's sad, it's just so interesting that people just they do want to know. It's like unless you just it's just opening that door and showing them that it's really not that scary or it's really easy and
or
like,
you benefit.
or you benefit and you realize like wait, oh, my partner is more physical touch and I'm more words of affirmation. So he knows that you have to tell me that I look great today, or like I need that, like, or I love you, or anything, or he needs more, like I'll kiss him or I'll hug him. And it's just, you realize that it just becomes a lot more simpler and fluid and easy once you actually know that about yourself.
Communicate.
Yeah, communicate. I think that's just what it is like communicating and really asking the questions that are the right ones.
That's the big part too, because I buck up against that bit of advice of like, a healthy relationship is about communication, which is similar to being like, good art is about paint. And you're
True.
like, bitch, what paint?
Yeah.
What canvas? How? Like,
Yep.
it to the point of that, like a lot of people aren't really taught, like, what are the inner workings of my intimate self? Like, how do I identify why I don't feel good with someone? Because I might be able to identify that. Like, I don't feel comfortable. But the ability to say, oh, it's because they misgendered me. Oh, it's because they don't speak my love language. Oh, it's because we have very different conflict resolution styles. Like, that's where you can actually be more action solution based. So
Right.
it's interesting to me. I think this space is the one area where we're like, you don't have to know and you can figure it out, or that wouldn't apply to anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you want to be good at any other topic in this world, you have to understand it and know the various different like facets and dynamics to it, even the ones that don't apply to you, because you're going to be with someone else who, maybe you don't care about feet, but you end up with a foot fetish partner.
I was actually about to ask that question of, let's just say you're interested in something, or vice versa, they're interested in something that you truly can't provide, or maybe it's something that is scary to you and you really don't have an open mind to do it because that's just not something you're interested in. What do you do when you hit that wall? Like they're into feet and you're not into feet.
Yeah.
For example.
A lot of people who have a particular kink like have been developing that and gaining the confidence for years. And sometimes they spring it on people in the moment and expect that person to meet them where they are, but they've had like years and years or lots of education, lots of videos. So I would say first and foremost, like you have to be a bit more patient with people.
Right.
And provide tools and resources for their own time and their own studying. They might be surprised to find they can come around or find different entry points. Maybe like feet is not the right entry point because there's a stigma there. Maybe instead it's like, we do leg massages or like I do hand stuff with you. So not being so goal oriented with our partners of like, this is what I want. This is what I need. Can you do it?
Yeah.
Or we're not like being graceful of like, it took me a long time to get to the place where I can even ask for that and know what that thing is. That's one. But two, you can get to certain points with people where it's like, I gave it the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
I watched the video. I tried the thing.
And it wasn't
I tried the hand massage the
Yeah.
whole time I was weirded out. It's just not my thing. And now we come to a place of like, is this an area we can compromise on, or is this a fundamental incompatibility that means that we restructure our relationship?
Totally, because that means if me how is this going to affect our relationship in the long run in terms of like, because sex might be really important in the relationship, and if that's just not something that's clicking, then that is something you have to consider for long term. Is this going to be a problem 4 years from now, months from now?
Yes.
You know, because like, is that then a reason to move on, or is that and find someone that is compatible with that? You know, I think that's a hard question. It's like whether or not.
I don't necessarily think that not being compatible on one certain sexual preference or kink is a complete deal breaker, as long as both parties are emotionally intelligent enough to, you know, correctly verbalize what they're willing to do or compromise on, or you know, I think as long as there's understanding from both people, I don't think it's a deal breaker.
Well, we've identified it's not for you. But for somebody else, that could be like,
that's what I'm saying.
I always say that with like, you know, like finances, and people are so judgmental about women who are financially focused, where it's like, there are probably things that you prioritize heavily in a relationship that matter a lot to you that wouldn't matter to that person.
Right.
Yeah.
So then it's like, there are some people who they have to draw that line and say, either one, we're going to open the relationship up so that I can find outlets for this because it's an important part of how I want to experience this world. Or two, we're not going to continue on experiencing the world together, and I'm comfortable with that.
Damn.
Well, mic drop to that. Shan, we could sit here and talk to you
literally for
all
hours.
day. I mean, I have like 100 more questions, but like we really got to wrap it up. I want everyone, if you want to continue to hear this conversation, you got to check out her podcast, Lovers and Friends. It's fantastic. I literally listened to 5 episodes yesterday. I'm obsessed.
It was
I
awesome.
really liked the ones it was about like dating in your 20s, like why it's the worst time to date. And I feel that. I really do. Tell everyone where they can find your podcast is streaming, all of your social media platforms, everything.
Yes, well, I believe that people are like going to remember one thing. So I'll stick with that one ask, because that's the most important thing I'm doing right now is my podcast. Like it's longer form discussions. It's more in the vein of the way that I want to do sex ed. I think everywhere else you have to make compromises.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're on someone else's platform, or because it's 30 seconds for a reel or whatever.
Right.
So this is a place where I'm like, no, this is exactly the way that I want this conversation to go.
Right.
So my podcast, Lovers and Friends, which is available wherever they're listening to this podcast.
Yes.
Everywhere. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming on.
Yay,
This has been so much
great
fun. Found a
time.
new friend. Thank you guys for joining, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.